Hello and welcome back to part 7 of this solo level 1 run that I'm doing. I think my plan for this episode is just kind of going through beating Morgott and opening up the entirety of the mountaintops of the giants. And then from there I can basically just access all of the endgame areas. I can open up Farum after beating the fire giant. I can open up the Haligtree after defeating Commander Naill. I don't think there's anything to do before we get to Morgott, so I think that's probably the first thing I'm going to go to. Well, now time to kill our daily bell-bearing hunter. That was easy. Alright, and now we come upon the Godskin Apostle. The other of the Godskin duo. I assume you can probably take this dude out in a similar manner to the, whatever, Godskin, the other Godskin dude. But, it's not easy. So much easier to just put pressure on it like this than on the noble. His attacks are a lot less annoying to deal with, to dodge. Most of the time you can just dodge through it. Ooh, that was a little bit close. Ha. Also, all of his special moves, when he does this second phase, are pretty easily just, avoidable. Two of them you can just literally stand right next to him. Like that. You can kind of stand next to him. And then the other ones, I think the only one where you can actually have to go away from him is when he starts doing the black spin. This one you can just dodge right through. Also, he does not punish like panic rolling near as much as the Godskin Noble does. A lot of times you can just panic roll out of hits. There you go. When he does the black flame, I think that's the only one where you have to actually get away from him. The rest of them you can kind of get up in his face. That was close. There you go. That was pretty easy. Godskin Noble is entirely about parrying and punishing that, and then the Godskin Apostle is just applying as much pressure as you can. Just by dodging through. His parrying timing is really, really weird. I dropped it pretty much after the first 2 runs of attempting that. Oh hey, and here's Millicent. Oh yeah, there's 2 of these dudes. Ah, the loathsome dung eater.
I will kill you.
And a crab.
Fall your corpse. Then the pox will truly be your own.
Come on. Yeah. Because a crab can hit anybody. him. I make sure to dodge all their stuff. This is funny. And you can deathlight him as well. Oh, that's hilarious. I just let the crab do all the work. Great. Thanks, Krabby. Just so we can have it for later, I'm gonna take on the Warrior Jar Arsenal warriors and see if I can get that. A lot of this is just being patient. The AI is quite dumb, but can kill you pretty much in one hit. Using 2 long swords to go with stagger, inflicting both frost and bleed on him. Then, if need be, for a mage, I have this. Alright, that should be the last of them. Give me the charm. There we go. It's nice to have. This allows us to wear heavier armor, wield more weapons, and such like that in case we need it. Now I'm returning back to the starting spawn point area. Just kind of want to beat this Grafted Sky on real quick. Get the Stormhawk King. Never been good at fighting these. Although it's not meant to have much HP. You can technically beat these at starting levels. Just gonna... Just gonna run in and poke. Just be a little bit cautious. Ah. Being dumb. And shit. Can you like do it? You've been okay, you've been standing there for 5 minutes. How long do they hold this? What the fuck? This is actually so dumb. They can hold this one attack for over, like they literally just hold it. They just hold it. This is dumb. That's so dumb. You should not be able to hold an attack that long. Come on, come at me. That's so dumb. It like can literally almost instantly kill you. So dumb. Okay, and they're going to do this. Don't know if this is probably a spear. There we go. I hate those enemies. They're so annoying to deal with. Now I got the Stormhawk King for Nefeli's questline. After clearing out pretty much everything before this, I think it's finally time to take on Morgott. This is a boss that I think might be quite a bit of a step above all of the other bosses. He hits very hard, he has quite a bit of HP, his moveset is very, very complex. So I think this is probably the first boss that I'll say that I'm not going to just start fighting it at an SL1. Probably what I'll be doing is I'll just create like a secondary character, run it through the game, and like basically only level up like HP and endurance, just so I can like take hits better. and then just sit in the fight and practice parrying and stuff like that. Just getting better in a environment that's more friendly for learning than getting one shot by every single mistake. Practicing might take anywhere from 1 hour of practice to a day or more of practice, especially for bosses now on. Um, it's just going to be I practice until I feel like I'm good enough at the boss that I can survive in it in an SL1 without getting hit too quickly, and then from there I'll switch over to the SL1 again. Um, Most likely from now on, counting deaths, I will not be counting deaths inside of the training area, just because I don't think I can keep track. That's not what I'm focusing on there. All of the death counts that I'll be taking care of will be basically when I'm actually in the SL1. Anyway, let's give this a shot, I guess.
Graceless, tarnished. What is thy business with these thrones? Godric the Golden. The twin prodigies, Mikola and Melania. General Radahn. Praetor Rykard. Luna Princess Rani. Willful traitors, all. Thy kind are all of a piece. Pillagers, emboldened by the flame of ambition. Have it writ upon thy meager grave. Felled by King Morgott, last of all kings. Put these foolish ambitions to rest.
And here we have Morgott. I first want to start off by talking about like the extra practice that I do before these fights. This is again mostly just going into like a secondary save or something like that with the same build setup that I use here, so the claws and the shield, and just sit in there with like HP, like somewhere like around like 50 vigor or something like that, and just a bunch of endurance to wear heavy armor, such that I can basically take hits and just learn dodges without having the insta kill punish that would come from an SL1. Uh, it makes it a lot easier to learn things like parries, where you can basically make a mistake because the parry timings are so precise that you can basically get right back into the fight without having to like restart. And it makes it so it's a lot faster to learn the bosses and a lot more enjoyable instead of just being frustrated that you can't do something properly and you just get super punished without any ability to learn. Now, in terms of the weapon selection, again, I'm using the claws. This weapon is something that I'll probably be using for the rest of like all of the bosses that at least can be like hit with status effects like bleed and frost, because it's a quick weapon. You can dual wield it, and it applies both bleed and frost in pretty good amounts. So it allows you to proc these status effects really quickly compared to any other weapon, and it doesn't matter that they do less damage because honestly, the boss HP bars are so large and your weapon damage is so low that it's like you're doing like extreme chip damage if you just try to swing at them, and it just doesn't work. Now, I also used the Scorpion Shield to parry instead of trying to use like the Buckler or something like that. That would maybe have more parry frames. This is just because the Scorpion Shield actually has 100% damage reduction for physical attacks. This allows me to basically have some situations where I miss a parry and I would still be able to survive, which I wouldn't in the case of using a Buckler or something. It just helps that since parries are so precise that it's pretty easy to mess them up, and it just gives me more consistency in the runs when I can make at least a few mistakes. Now, on top of the shield, I also used the golden parry. This basically just gives you an increased range and also increased speed of parry. So it just makes it a lot easier to hit things. And sometimes you can actually parry when the weapon's not actually even going to hit you, and it'll still parry the weapon with the range that it has. So it gives you a lot of safety for parrying. Now, along with those things, I also use the Kukri a lot in this fight. This is also something that I'll probably use in more fights from now on. It basically allows me to give some ranged bleed procs, and it just allows me to keep pressure on Morgott in terms of the bleed buildup, and basically just making sure that I can get the maximum amount of DPS out, even if he zones me with like the sword rain or something like that. Now, in terms of Morgott's moveset, a really great thing about this is that almost all of his slashes with his swords can be parried. You can parry them, you can get an opening afterwards to try to get in a hit or something like that, or at least reduce the pressure that he'll put on you. Now, the timings on a lot of his attacks are quite delayed, so he'll just hold his weapon for a really long time, and that makes it kind of hard to read some of the parries. So some of the attacks that he does, I just choose not to parry and just dodge out of the way. The ones that are like super, super delayed, just to add consistency. Then in phase two, he also adds in quite a few moves that can't be parried. I know like the red slash and stabs can't be parried, but those also give you a lot of large openings that you can just swing on him a lot. That actually builds up the status procs a lot faster than parrying him because instead of you know, every three parries that you actually get a critical hit in, you can just swing like 4 or 5 times after he leaves an opening. Parries are mostly just used to reduce the pressure that he has on you. Now, in terms of challenge, this boss was probably one of the hardest ones I encountered. It took me 55 deaths to get through this boss fight, not including all of the ones that would come from the like practice ones where I had full HP. Now, it technically didn't have the most deaths in an SL1. That still goes to the Draconic Tree Sentinel with 57, but this one definitely came very close. A lot of times I make these fights harder on myself just because I'm doing these things extremely late at night, like 2 a.m. or something like that, after like a long day of classes and possibly exams and quizzes and stuff like that. So sometimes what I find is that if it takes me a really long time and I just feel like I'm getting worse as the time goes on, I'll like just go to bed, wake up the next day and rested and be able to beat this boss pretty easily. Like I think this boss, I went to sleep and then came back and beat it on like the third try the next day, just because I was no longer tired and I actually could read his moves instead of playing dumb. Now, there's also the fact that I make these fights harder on myself by also just trying to make them as fun as possible by like parrying everything I can. So like towards the end of the fight, I kind of wanted to kill him through a parry and riposte, but a lot of times that would get me killed because I would just get nervous and screw up the parry or just try to parry something I shouldn't. I know that got me a lot of times and probably could have finished him. I think within like the sixth attempt at this boss, I think I got him down within like one hit, and I was like, all right, cool, I want to parry him to kill him. And then I screwed up the parry, and then it took me another 50 attempts to try it again. Um, it's not too bad that that happens because a lot of times I just kind of want to keep fighting. This boss is really fun. And overall, I just really enjoy fighting this boss. Like this is one of the bosses that just make me want to keep coming back to these games. This is why I play these games. It really feels like there's a good balance between the boss speed and pressure on the player, as well as leaving enough openings that the player can actually get in some sort of punish on the boss as well. It really feels like a dance between the boss and the player, and it just really, really gets your adrenaline pumping in these types of fights. Now, a lot of times I also just create backups of these fights, just like right outside the gates, where I can basically just load the save file. and play it again instead of having to run through the entire game again. I do this for like a lot of the bosses that are just really enjoyable, so I can just play them again. This is definitely one of the boss fights that I'll make a save and play again because I can just see myself playing this over and over again and just getting better and better. Morgott is definitely one of my favorite bosses in this game. I hope they do more of this, especially in possible DLCs. Let's go. I love this fight.
Tarnished. Thou art but a fool. The Erd Tree wards off all who deign approach. We are all forsaken. Thy deeds shall be met with failure, just as I.
There we go. Morgott's dead. It's pretty challenging. Took me quite a few attempts. Maybe just because I was doing this really, really late at night. But that opens up pretty much all of the endgame areas. That opens up the mountaintops of the giants, opens up the consecrated snowfields, so we can at least get to Melania and the fire giant. That also opens up the last quest for the Volcano Manor, which I want to do and complete before actually killing Rykard. So now Rykard should be able to be beaten. And then we have Fire Giant, which is pretty easy, and that opens up Farum Azula. So I think most of the game should be open at this point, and now it's just actually knocking out all the bosses. I think the next goal, just clearing out most of the area, getting in front of Melania, getting in front of Mo, getting to, I mean, Rykard's already done. And then I think I'm going to take on Fire Giant just to open up Farum Azula. But now time to explore. Alright. On tops of the giants, come across this minor Erdtree with this Erdtree avatar. Now Erdtree avatars on their own aren't too challenging. They've got a really simplistic moveset, basically identical to the Asylum Demon from Dark Souls 1. But this one has a little bit of an interesting part to it in that when you get it down to phase 2, or half out HP, it splits itself in two, which creates a really interesting challenge because obviously any one hit will kill you. So there's like zero option to push it. Phase 1 isn't any different than just fighting them normally. Just wait for them to do a hit, and then go in for a jumping heavy. You can guard break them, hit them with the frost, and it'll actually do some damage. Then phase 2 is where things get a little bit more interesting, because you can't just run in and hit them. And I also have a dagger on me with fire, that if it does get frosted, I can just do that. But now you have phase 2. There's 2 of them. And instead of actually running in to deal damage on my own with a weapon, I just use firebombs. You deal enough damage with a firebomb that you should be able to get through it with the stack that you have in your inventory. And another good thing is that if you can hit both of them at once, you do double the amount of damage. Now obviously a big problem with this is if you get hit by anything, you are dead. There you go, there's a double hit. So you kind of got to be really cautious about where you use them. Sometimes you want to just bait out one of their attacks. That might have been a little close, but also another thing is that this area is not the greatest to fight them in. I'm gonna use this now, so I can just... Alright then. I did not expect him to be able to hit me from there, but... You should be able to do enough damage with just the fire bombs to kill them. And if not, I do have the super potent ones from the mountaintops. Especially when they do that, it doesn't give you much option to push in. I gotta wonder how much do these do? Because they say they do more damage. Ooh, that is quite a lot more damage. Oh, this terrain is ass to fight them in. Always gotta have the most annoying fights right on top of cliff sides, as per usual. Actually, it doesn't do too much damage. I think I just hit both of them at once. That was close. Use Torrent to just, like, get a bit further out. Because they keep deciding to do this really annoying attack. It's not as bad now, but attack is probably their worst one. I could have missed. Because it's just, you really can't do anything with them out. You just get a run. Oh, and he's doing it twice in a row, because that's fine. Don't get any option to push. Oh. I don't know why that happened, but my screen went black there for a second, as soon as they died. The game has been doing that a little bit too often for me to like. Or it just decides to go black and just alt-tab out. I don't know if that's a problem with my monitor or my PC or just a problem with the game, but I need to get that fixed soon. It wasn't too hard, it wasn't too much of a challenge. I just kind of wanted to show that it's a bit different than all the other fights and how I take them on. So. Now we have the last mission for the Volcano Manor. Kill this dude. Cool. Might be a little bit difficult. Looks like I just want to run in and then hit him. His hardest thing is probably going to be that Bloodhound step. He doesn't insta-kill us, which is nice. Although that Bloodhound step means it is impossible for us to get any hits in after the first hit. Ooh, gotta love those Bloodhound step iframes. Ah, but he gets with both, and it's kill. I don't think it should be too bad. Now to get to the Haligtree, we have to actually get both halves of the Haligtree Medallion. One of them is located behind Commander Naill, who's down here in the um, mountaintops of the Giants. So this boss is definitely going to be tricky. He summons two NPCs right next to him at the very start of the fight, but he is passive until they're both killed, so hopefully that can aid us. Biggest question is, can these two be parried? Or especially this right one is going to be a pain. And yes, they can. Come on. As you can see why this one's going to be a pain in the ass. Now something that's very useful in this fight is actually the Bewitching Branches. These are able to actually charm an enemy that's hit by him, and the two knights that he summons next to him can be affected by this. So you can basically turn the knights against him. Now, I only want to do this for the first knight, the one with the two swords. Just I want to get him out of the way as quick as possible. Um, that just gives me a little bit of damage against the other knights, and hopefully it gets himself killed since he's outnumbered. That'll just basically put it a 2-on-1 with two way more predictable enemies, which will make the fight a lot easier. If I have to deal with both summons and Naill at the same time, it just would be ridiculously hard. So I think I'm going to use this. Now, these things are quite limited. They require Miquella's Lilies and Sacramental Bloods. Both of them are not really farmable until you get to the Haligtree. So you really only have a limited supply right now. Um, I think I have 15 right now, but I'm going to be attempting this in like a different save just to make sure that I can preserve these and then come back to here when I have a little bit more consistency in attempts. And now we're on to Commander Naill. This boss is extremely similar to Commander O'Neill. They share roughly the same moveset. At least there's a few moves that transfer over between the two of them. This only, though, I find happens whenever you're like within close range to him and he decides to use his polearm to swing at you. If you're at long range, he goes into a lot of like longer attacks that are quite different. Now, at the start of this fight, you can see that I used the Bewitching Branch to kind of like charm the right dual sword enemy. This is just because I don't want to fight this as a gank fight. Um, Ganks are never fun, and so I basically just try to get one out of the way. So it's more of a one-on-one fight that's just phased between the two of them. Both of them can be parried, so the dual sword knight can be parried, but it just he puts on a lot of pressure and he's quite a difficult enemy. So I just don't want to spend the time trying, and I just want to fight Naill himself. I could technically bewitch both of the summons that he has, and then have them basically solo Naill, but I still do want to fight Naill. Like that's the entire reason I come to this fight is to fight him specifically, not the things he summons. So I mostly just use the Bewitching Branch to get rid of the gank at the start of the fight, and then just go from there. I say if a boss uses gank strategies, I can use cheap strategies of my own, like using a Bewitching Branch or something like that. For weapons, again, using the cause. Same explanation that I have for every other fight of using these. Good bleed proc, good frost proc. Any other weapon really does no damage, like a longsword just doesn't do that anymore. I don't know if I'll really be using that weapon anymore. Now I also do have the Scorpion Shield again. All of his swings with his pole arm can be parried. Now they're not as easy because he also does like to delay a lot of his attacks, similar to Morgott, but sometimes if I feel like I want to get some extra pressure on him, I just try to parry something that he does that gives pretty good openings. A lot of times it's actually better just to try to punish any of the openings he does after he swings by just standard light slashes instead of trying to go for a parry. Parry only gives you like 2 hits of the riposte, whereas like a slash can give you like 4, maybe 5 or something like that. So it's a lot better to just go for light attacks to maximize the DPS and not have the fight last like 30 minutes. My strategy mostly for this fight kind of comes along the fact of just run away, because a lot of his like distance closing attacks where he can like jump at you leave a pretty good opening after he's done. So you can basically just dodge the initial hit, swing once, and then dodge out. And That'll give you good DPS, plus also being really, really safe in the fight and not accidentally getting like one shot by one of his attacks. It's just dodge, punish, and repeat for the entirety of the fight. It just takes quite a long time and making sure you don't make any mistakes in that. Now, in terms of challenge for this fight, I found a big challenge was kind of just figuring out how to avoid some of the insta kills that he has. Like the lightning legs that he has can pretty easily one-shot the player. And honestly, with these bosses now coming towards the end of the game, these types of insta kill moves are just becoming more and more common. Like every single boss has some sort of attack or multiple attacks that can just one-shot the player, even if they're wearing like full heavy armor plus damage reduction items and stuff like that, it just kind of becomes hard to not just die in one hit with your tiny HP pool. There are some things you can do to get around it, like using the arsenal charms and stuff like that to just be able to equip extremely heavy armor, or using again like things like the talisman, the shield talisman, or dragon crest shields or something like that, just to like reduce the amount of damage coming in. Can possibly turn an insta kill into two hit kills, which just makes the fight infinitely easier. I will say, comparing this game to the other Souls games, it's kind of like the insta kills from a lot of these bosses seem to just be coming on quicker. Like, we're only around like 3/4 of the way through the game, maybe a little bit less than that, and bosses are already starting to insta kill pretty quickly. This kind of set on a bit faster than the other Dark Souls games. I remember that those ones really didn't get into insta kills until you got to like the final boss or the DLCs, and DLCs haven't even came out for this game yet. So I'm kind of interested to see how the challenge is going to start ramping up for the DLCs, since I know From never holds back on those. But then again, the DLCs are generally some of the best things From ever do, so I'm excited to see what it is. And overall with this fight, I think it's pretty fun. Like, obviously, it can get annoying with the two at the very beginning, but again, just using a Bewitching Branch makes that infinitely easier, just getting rid of one of them at the start of the fight, and so it's not a gank. But Naill himself is pretty straightforward. Gives good openings, still has some punishing and pressure on the player, gives a good dance between the two of them. It's enjoyable as long as you can get rid of the gank at the start of the fight. I've always found in these kind of fights that the more human-like that the boss is, or the closer it is to the player, without being an actual like NPC player, the more fun the boss fights is. If they're like some sort of monstrosity or some sort of like I don't know large giant creature, they're just a pain in the ass. But if they're like a player, but not an actual player, they are some of the most fun boss fights in the game. They wield a weapon, they're probably fun. Now there's still a bit left of this fight. As it comes down to his low HP, he starts to drag out the fight a little bit more. But I don't really have anything left to talk about, so I'm just going to let you watch the rest of it. Commander Naill down. And that means you also get the second half of the secret Haligtree medallion up here. I'm gonna explore that area, get up to Melania. That fight wasn't too bad. It was a lot of just mistakes on my end that I just kept making. But at least with light weapons, he gives you a lot of openings. He seems decently weak to a lot of the to frostbite and bleed. So it's more just that first phase that you have to deal with, and using the Bewitching Branch makes it so much easier, because then you can basically get rid of the really, really annoying one with the double swords, like right off the bat. So that makes it so much easier to deal with. And after defeating Commander Naill, you actually come out and you can access the Haligtree, and the first boss you come across is Loretta again. This boss is really similar to the Loretta fight you had before. All the moves should be almost identical, so it shouldn't be too much of a different fight. Obviously buffed, but now it's a physical form. Now we can use bleed. So we actually have a quicker weapon to deal with instead of dealing with a slow-ass longsword. Oof. But anyone hit, basically will kill us. That's death. Yeah. Tried to hit with the magic coming at me. This will take a while because it seems like he's a little bit resistant to bleed and frost. So, and here is Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree. Even though this boss is near identical to the Loretta you find in the Carrion Manor, I still had quite a lot of challenge with this boss. There's some moves that seem to be ramped up. It obviously does a lot more damage, and it seemed quite a bit resistant to both bleed and frost. Not too resistant, but it still seemed to take quite a few hits to proc either of them. And obviously, any boss that has the ability to proc insta-kill hits, whether that be like staggering you into a double hit, or whether that just be doing enough damage to kill you outright, just makes fights so much harder than what they would be otherwise. That's kind of the main challenge with these runs, it's just the insta-kill problem. Now, for weapons, again, going with the standard claw plus kukri for maximum pressure and the bleed and frost build, but I also use the inverted hawk heater shield along with the carrion retaliation ash of war. This is mostly just because the you can parry most of the spells that Loretta casts at you, though it's not advisable to parry all of them. So like any of the ones that attack really fast, like the glint blades, you'll probably get punished since there is quite a decent recovery for the carrion retaliation. You just want to parry ones that are like single hits, so like the glintstone scrap or the magic bow. Now, you can also see that I use medium shields a lot instead of trying to go for light shields that might have like faster parry frames or stuff like that. This is mainly for two reasons. The first reason is the 100% physical DR. The light shields don't get a lot of damage reduction, so like even though you have a better option to parry, it's like if you make a mistake, you're gonna get punished. Like you're gonna die if you make a mistake. Whereas if you use these shields and you make a mistake, there's the chance that the boss doesn't just kill you and you can just try again without having to restart the entirety of the fight. And the second reason is fashion. Like I just think these two shields look really cool and they work with a lot of builds. I remember I used this shield a lot on my first run. The further into these runs you get, the more likely it is to just bosses just insta kill you, and the less absorption matters. So honestly, like when I get towards the end of the game, a lot of what I'll be wearing in terms of armor or in terms of shields or anything like that, that's just going to be mostly vanity. I just want to make my character look cool. Now, in terms of Loretta's moveset, there's a few things I noticed while fighting her. First off, it's the glint blades are actually really slow in tracking, so you can basically just dodge them by just running to the side. That allows you to just make sure you can keep your stamina up. To attack afterwards, you can regain stamina after that, as well as use that to focus more on any of the larger attacks. The glintstone pebbles, especially when there's five of them, have to be dodged. Unlike the glint blades, they're pretty quick, so you have to actually dodge them. Um, and if you don't, they can deal a lot of damage and probably can insta-kill you if you get hit by more than one of them. And then an interesting quirk that I found with one of the moves, being the magical sweeps, is actually that the hitbox only is at the end of the polearm. The part where you actually take the damage is only where the blade will turn blue when she starts doing the sweeps. So if you stand right next to her, you can basically just avoid damage without dodging, since you're just out of the hitbox range. Now, I would advise to just dodge anyway, just to be safe, because any small mistake will, get you insta-killed. But it's something that you can use to your advantage, and it just makes it a little bit more consistent to dodge that. And overall, this is a pretty decent fight. It's quite enjoyable. It's not too complex, but it's also not too bad. It's got an interesting enough moveset, enough openings to keep up a fast pace of fight, but also enough pressure to, make it so that you have to actually learn the boss instead of just wailing on it without a brain. But this fight, for some reason, always made my hands sweat and made me lose grip on my controller. I'm not entirely sure why. It doesn't happen for the fights that I get really nervous in. It doesn't happen for the fights that take really long time. It just this fight specifically. It's just every time I fought it, I was like, all right, cool. My hands are starting to sweat and just drenched in buckets of water. It's like I'm not even nervous in this fight. It just I don't know. And another thing is that this is actually my second time fighting Loretta, the one that's being recorded right now. On the first time I beat her, I forgot to press the screen capture button. So all I recorded during that was a black screen. So I kind of had to come back and fight her again. The second time fighting her was actually much easier than the first, only taking around like 4 or 5 attempts to like re-record it. But it kind of goes to show that like once you've learned a boss enough to be able to beat it at an SL1, you can basically just do it again really consistently. The entire fight is just making sure you can get consistent enough to beat it once, and then once you do that, you can just do it every single time since it shouldn't vary too much. Alright, there we go. That's Loretta down, which opens up the rest of the Haligtree. That boss was harder than anticipated. Not necessarily because of its moveset, just because for some reason I always made mistakes on the insta-kill procs and stuff like that. So, well, with that, I think we can prep ourselves for Melania and get all the way over there. But I think this is the last I'll be seeing of the Haligtree for a while now, since I'm not doing Melania until closer to the end. And now we arrive at the Fire Giant. I'm not sure exactly how to expect this fight going. On my original playthrough, he was probably one of the easier bosses. I never had a challenge with him, but I know a lot of people do have a challenge with him. So I feel like this could just be like a for winning first try, or takes me another like 60, 70 attempts. I mean, we do bleed. A lot of the complaint is just his massive HP pool. Bleed allows you to kind of get around that. Frost as well. A lot of people had complaints about his just insta kills, but that's just standard for these runs. Oh, I am not wielding my stuff. Mostly just want to look at his feet. His feet tells basically what he's going to be doing. The swings. Ooh, actually didn't insta kill me. Alright, cool. Have enough armor and protections that doesn't have. That does though. Yeah. Been a while since I last fought this dude. And now we have the Fire Giant. I want to preface with the fact that this boss pulls out quite a few problems with the Souls formula to a forefront. It's just there's a lot of things that either need to be fixed, or rather just things that need to be avoided when dealing with these types of fights. I'll explain a little bit on this later in it, but it's just I did not enjoy this boss at all. Um, in terms of weapons, first off, whenever looking towards like weapon selection, I always generally look for the boss's resistances and HP first. So first off with the HP, the Fire Giant has an HP of 43,000. In comparison to the final boss of Radagon and the Elden Beast combined, only have 35,000. So this boss has 10,000 HP on top of the final boss in the game. It's kind of bullshit. Um, the second is the resistances. The Fire Giant has 565 points of resistances in Bleed, Rot, and Poison, and 1,216 points in Defrost. That my weapon only does 66 points of Frost and 45 points of Bleed every single hit. This means that I have to hit the giant about 13 times to get the first proc of Bleed, and 19 times to get the first proc of Frostbite. After the first proc, resistance is increased for all bosses, making them harder to proc again. So basically, by the time you get to the third proc, where it starts to level out, you have to hit him around like 40 times just to get either of the status procs to happen. Especially with how much this giant moves, it just seems really unreasonable to like try to use your weapon to get a lot of the procs off in this fight. It's just annoying to try to get that off. So instead of trying to go for, bleed and for frost only, I actually try to add in rot and poison just to give some extra DPS when I'm not actually at his feet, just to make this fight go by a little bit quicker than otherwise it would have been. I still stay in melee range to get bleed and frost off just to get a higher DPS and, again, make the fight last as short as possible since this is quite annoying. But you could probably play it a little bit safer and just run away once you get the rot and poison proc off, dodge everything from range. Now, in terms of the boss's moveset, I kind of want to just start with the problems that I have with it. So, like, I'm fine with the high HP and resistances for this boss. Like, percent damage does exist in the game. It's pretty easy and common to get this on your weapon, and it does quite a lot. Like, bleed builds are like basically the meta of this game right now. So, also, the Fire Giant does take increased damage to any of the melee attacks you get once you break his ankle, so you can deal like almost like a 1,500 damage to a proper level weapon to his ankle. Most of my problems with this boss come from its massive size combined with the camera. Like to get any hits, especially with like a melee character, you have to be right up next to his feet, meaning that well, you can't see anything other than his feet. You can't see his upper body, which is where all of his telegraphs for all of his attacks will be. So it's kind of like you really don't see any of the attacks coming. You just get hit and oh, you're dead. I guess try again. It's just really, really annoying. And it's even like on like a proper leveled account, this dude does a lot of damage. He does some of the highest damage out of any boss in the game. And so he can one shot even properly leveled players. So it's not even like a problem that's unique to this type of run. Like a lot of his attacks, since you can't see anything of his movements, it just kind of feels like you have to dodge off of instinct instead of actually being able to read the boss. This just makes it really, really annoying and not fun to fight because it doesn't feel like there's any skill in fighting this way. It just you just feel like you get lucky. Um, there's no way that you feel like you can improve. You just fight until eventually he decides to do a proper attack and you just get some good damage off and oh, now you win. Even with all of those problems, one of the biggest things I had was actually just the arena itself. This has probably got to be one of the worst arenas in the game. It's pretty big in comparison to all the others, but that's not accounting for the fact that this boss can roll and roll literally halfway across the entire arena in one. And like you have to travel that entire distance while he can start wailing on you, and it's just so annoying to try to get to close that distance. Just he does not stand still at all. And then also, you're on a rocky mountainside. Like, there's boulders and trees everywhere. For the giant, that's no problem at all. He'll just step over them. He'll stand on the top of them. Doesn't matter. But for the player, you can't even jump on top of a lot of them. Like, you don't have the verticality to even hit them. Besides, while you're jumping, you can't dodge, you can't hit. So a lot of times when you're trying to get around a tree or get over a boulder, he's just going to swing and kill you. And there's nothing you can do because it's either run away and let him stand on top of the boulder swinging at you with range, or try to close distance to finish the fight and just get killed because you can't do anything else otherwise. It's just so annoying to fight them. And then also you're on a 40-degree hill, so like a lot of the hitboxes for any of his attacks will just kind of be really awkward. They'll change depending on your orientation on the hill to the fire giant. Even if you're in the same position in like reference to his feet, if you're like slightly up the hill, his hitbox for one of his like shield bastions can actually hit behind him, which normally it doesn't if you're on flat ground, which is really really stupid. And then with all of the like terrain and all that other stuff, if he decides to roll, sometimes what can happen is you could just get stuck on the terrain, and then his AI freaks out, and then he just like insta kills you. It's just everything about this boss fight is just a problem. It's not a gank boss fight, but like holy shit, this boss is terrible. Now, overall, like with all of this annoyance that I've had, it seems I did come across like some sort of bug when fighting him. Uh, that if the giant is poisoned or afflicted with rot as he goes into phase two, he'll take a massive chunk of damage as soon as the cutscene ends. That'll kill him like almost immediately. Um, this seems to be a problem with the current 1.04 patch that released like a week prior to me fighting this boss. I had no idea that this bug existed until I like looked into it afterwards and found that is also something that other people are finding. It happened on the first time I actually got to the second phase, so I really didn't have a way to like, oh, I'll just not do this. Like I watched the entire cutscene, which is what I normally do on the first time I fight a boss, even in these SL1 runs, is I just watch the cutscene all the way through, and apparently that's also why it does so much damage, is it seems to proc the entirety of the cutscene. I don't know. I I generally don't abuse glitches in these runs because it's just not as fun. But I've definitely had my limit with this boss. It's just so much bullshit that he has. It's just not fun fighting him. I'll just take the win and just go on to more likable bosses. I mean, like technically, I did follow all my rules. I still level one, still use no weapon upgrades, didn't use any summons, didn't use any spirits. I may redo the fight in the future, under more like legitimacy, where the glitch is patched. But in the current patch, I'll take the win and I'll move on because I hate this boss. I actually just hate this boss. What in the fuck just happened? That had to be a glitch or some sort. Like, I guess there's no phase two? Uh, I don't know. It seemed to be like a fast DOT, so apparently, like, maybe during the phase transition, something with Scarlet Rot gets fucked up, or Scarlet Rot or Poison gets fucked up, and it just does a shit ton of damage afterwards. I have no fucking clue, but I will take it because that boss fight is a pain. Uh, I am confused, but whatever. Well, with the giant now down, we can actually burn the Erd Tree. This allows us to access Fair Missoula, fight Malekith, and Godskin Apostle.
I have long observed the lands between. This world is in dire need of repair and death. Indiscriminate. Are you prepared to commit a cardinal sin? Very well. Let my hand rest upon you for but a moment. O Erdtree, you shall burn. Burn for the sake of the new Lord. Thank you for guiding me here. The one who walks alongside flame shall one day meet the road of destined death. Goodbye.
Alright, and now we're in the end game. All we have left is Godskin Duo, Malekith, Godfrey, and Radagon. Home stretch, but I feel like this might take longer than the other parts. Well, that is all the time I have left in this part. We were able to get quite a lot done, defeating Morgott, clearing out the mountaintops of the giants, and actually getting to Farum Azula after beating the fire giants. I think plan for next time, just clear out Farum Azula and beat Malekith. Might be quite difficult, but at least it's a good fight. And after that, we basically just have the last two bosses in the game left, so I think this is gonna start coming to a close, probably like one or two left, but I will see you next time.